Alright, I'll go ahead and get started, everyone. So my name's Mary Effler. On YouTube, I'm known as kawaiijutsu. I've been doing my YouTube channel for about 2 years now, so I've also got a lot of information on there, just about random stuff, if you decide you want to go see more after this. There's also more conversations with other ALTs, so you can get more people's experiences than just my own. Do I need to use the microphone, or can you all hear me okay? I'm a fairly loud person. So, let me go ahead. As you can see, this is the panel about living and working in Japan. Primarily, we're going to be talking for the job aspect. We'll talk about teaching in Japan, just because that's the easiest one to do, in my opinion, and probably the one most people are interested in. And then we'll talk about more of the social aspect of living there, or some of the more practicalities of actually living there, like apartments, food, that sort of thing. And then we'll probably have plenty of time at the end for question and answer. So if you've got an idea, just keep it tucked away, and I promise I'll get to it. Also, I really like your mobile phone. I've got one myself. It's awesome. Sorry, I saw it and had to comment. Alright, so a little bit about me at first. I went to Japan in 2011. I started as a JET participant in Fukushima Prefecture. I lived in Fukushima City. I was there for 2 years. I taught high school, so I was a prefectural level ALT. And then after that, I moved to Kanagawa Prefecture, which is just to the west of Tokyo. And I taught with Interac in elementary schools for about 7 months. And since the school year switches over in April, that's when I came back to Dallas, and I'm here to finish up my master's degree. Like I said, if you want, I've got a YouTube channel called kawaiijutsu. You can go there and find out tons more information, or just PM me there if you want more information and you want to talk to me. And that's me and the giant Buddha, which is, most of you probably know about it. Alright, so as far as jobs for living in Japan go, obviously teaching English is the most popular choice. It's got the lowest kind of entry-level barrier as far as job qualifications go. You also don't have to speak Japanese for most companies to go there, so that's appealing to a lot of people. And for a lot of people, they find it the most enjoyable out of any of the jobs, because obviously if you like working with people or you like working with children, you're going to find that job very, very enjoyable. There are, of course, other options. You can work in other industries, other jobs, but in a lot of those cases, it's harder to get that visa. The language prerequisite is going to be a lot higher. It'll be harder to make the connections necessary to get such a job, especially as a foreigner. So there's a little bit more to overcome, but obviously that is an option, and of course people do that as well. So talking about getting a visa, which is the most important thing to do. If you go ahead and join with something like the JET program or Interac, they'll take care of your visa for you ahead of time. So most people come in with an instructor or a specialist in humanities visa. Instructors, that visa allows you to work in public or private schools, and the specialist in humanities lets you work in English conversation schools or eikaiwas and the like. Both of those last for 1 or 3 years. After 3 years, you have to re-up it, which is its own little process. The requirements for it, all you have to do is hold a bachelor's degree, or you have to just have 10 years of experience in whatever related field. Your bachelor's degree can be in literally anything you want. Mine was in web design. That doesn't have to have anything to do with anything else. There is such a thing called a working holiday visa, which some of you might have heard of course. Sadly, I don't believe that's available for US citizens. I think Canadians and a couple of other countries have that option, but I don't think it works for US citizens. Some people go there to work in other industries. You can get a visa that's meant for intra-company transfers. The only requirement for that is that you have to have 1 year of experience working at that company's overseas office. So you can't just sign up for some company that has a branch in Tokyo and hope to instantly get transferred over. It's not quite going to work like that. Another one is the cultural activities visa, which I've heard a lot of people really want to go over on a cultural activities visa because it seems really easy. The requirements for it is, you just have to study something, particularly Japanese. You can go do karate for a year in Japan, and that would satisfy it. The only problem is you're not allowed to make income on that visa. So that's probably not going to work for a lot of people unless you're rich. The last one is there is a self-sponsored visa, which is an option. But that one, I've looked into it, but I think it's a lot harder to get, especially if you're from outside the country already. It'd probably be easier to switch over to that one once you're in, because you have to get a lot of paperwork signed, like you have to have a sponsor in the country, you have to prove that you have a certain amount of income. It's just a lot of bureaucracy and paperwork. So obviously the easiest to get would be the instructor or specialist in humanities, which chances are if you go over there to teach, your company is going to handle all of that requirement for you. So first, talking about the JET program. I'm assuming, who here knows what JET program is? Alright, I'll go ahead and briefly explain. The JET program is a government initiative started by the Japanese government in the late 80s. Basically, Japan in the late 80s was seen as a very xenophobic society. Even more so than now, very, very xenophobic. So they started this program to bring foreigners over to Japan to teach English, to say, no, we're totes okay with foreigners, everything's totally fine, come on over to Japan and teach English. So the JET program, unlike a lot of other programs, is not a teaching program, as it were. That's simply what you do to earn your keep. JET specifically bills itself as grassroots internationalization. So there's not as much support from the JET program itself as far as your job or your day-to-day life goes as far as that. They'll help you a lot socially, but not really in relation to your job, which some people find disappointing when they go to work for them. JET contracts are for a length of 1 year, and at the end of the year, if your base school likes you and if you like them, you can try to re-up for up to 5 years maximum. 3 is the normal length of stay. To stay for 4 or 5 years, you basically, like your school has to really, really like you, or you have to prove that you've made some sort of significant contribution in your community that you need to stay for. So, for my advice, as far as people who are looking at going on the JET program, you should be very, very comfortable going somewhere that you have not requested. A friend of mine who's from Houston came with me on the JET program. She requested all southern places because she's only ever lived in Houston. They sent her to Aomori, which is the second most northern prefecture in Japan, where the snow gets up to about yay high. So obviously completely didn't listen to her requests whatsoever. I got my third choice because my third choice was Fukushima, and I went about 4 months after the Eastern Tohoku earthquakes. So obviously, since I'd asked for Fukushima, I went to Fukushima. But a lot of cases, most people, though they're initially disappointed they didn't get exactly what they wanted, they later find that they absolutely adore being where they were. JET is also less likely to place you within a main city. It's more likely to place you in the suburbs or in a slightly more rural area. But a lot of people find that this is actually a preferable placement for them because they get to see more of that sort of genuine, actual day-to-day life instead of just the normal cityscape you might see in an anime or something. Be prepared to fail a time or two when you apply. I failed my first year, flat out, at the paper application. My second year, passed with flying colors. I have absolutely no idea what changed between those 2 years. I'm not kidding. If I could tell you what changed, I would, but I really don't know. But the JET acceptance rate for most of the American consulates is 11%. Just as a function of how many people apply. So, like I said, be prepared to fail a time or two, because it'll probably happen. But as a second-year application person who got accepted, totally possible. As most people ask what's the most important thing that they look for on your application, I'd say it's your statement of purpose and your letters of recommendation. You also have to fill out like a bunch of other stuff, but honestly I think that's less important. Your statement of purpose, which I'll get to a little bit up here, covers what you'll bring to JET and what you'll take out of it. And then your letters of recommendation obviously are how other people see you, which in Japan is very important. They care a great deal about how other people see you. They're also most concerned about your ability to adapt. Like I said, JET's main goal is grassroots internationalization. So if you're simply going to go over there and watch anime and live in Akihabara and not speak to anyone, they probably don't want you there because you're not actually going to share anything with anyone. So they're very concerned with how willing you are to adapt to a Japanese lifestyle and fully embrace all aspects of living in Japan, not just the ones you initially like while going there. Like I said, the most important question they want in the application process is what will you bring to JET and what will you bring back to the US? So the first one specifically, what makes you different from anyone else who would apply to JET? Because obviously if you're applying to JET, you probably like Japan. That's fantastic, so do 5,000 other applicants. So how do you love Japan in a different way? What are you going to bring? In my case, they were very interested in the fact that I developed a mobile application to teach hiragana. So they wanted to know how I would bring mobile, like new technology, new emerging media, how would I bring that into the Japanese classroom, since a lot of Japan on a day-to-day basis is still very much stuck in the 90s as far as technology is concerned. So they found that really, really interesting. And then the second part of that question, which is equally important, is what will you bring back afterwards? Obviously, grassroots internationalization is a two-way street. You have to bring something back. So what do you do in your daily life that this experience in Japan will somehow benefit, will somehow help other people? That's another thing that they really want to know. Like I said, JET will give you plenty of help socially. They will make sure that there are lifelines you can call if you start to freak out or you get depressed or you want to meet people. There's tons of help there. Absolutely, totally set. As far as if you have problems at your job, you're kind of SOL. They sort of expect you to be able to solve that by yourself, or it'll be up to your individual, like prefectural advisors, who sort of 50-50 shot of them actually being any good at helping you. So if you go on JET, be prepared to fully embrace the Japanese workplace yourself and be very good at figuring out your own problems. The last thing is JET's unofficial motto is each situation is different. You'll see it abbreviated ESID all over the place. It's basically their way of saying, like, you're obviously getting sent all over the country at all different levels of schools. So, what applies to one JET may not apply to you. There's tons of JETs who get free housing, for example. I never did. I paid $500 a month at first for my apartment, while 2 blocks away, 20 JETs had free housing. So literally, each situation is different, and they're going to keep repeating that to you anytime you have a question, which is basically their way of saying, suck it up, cupcake. So moving on, for Interac, since that's the other major program people go to teach with. The main difference between JET and Interac is that while JET is a government initiative meant to do grassroots internationalization, Interac is a teaching company. They are there to teach English, and that is what they are most concerned about. So if you're more of a practical-minded person, you might like Interac's approach a little bit better. You've got more choice as to where you live. I got to choose the specific city that I would live in and the specific part of the city that I would live in. This may have helped that I was already in Japan when I applied to Interac and I knew exactly where I wanted to go, but they were far more accommodating as far as listening to where I wanted to live and far more willing to accept that. They're also, like I said, since they're primarily a teaching company, they care far more about how well you can teach something. Like I said, the JET application process is they want an essay from you, and they want your letters of recommendation. Interac's interview process is they give you a Myers-Briggs personality test as you walk in the door. And you fill that out. You then take a 2-page-long grammar test. Make sure that you speak English properly. And then you sit down for an hour and talk about your experiences teaching, what you think is difficult, rewarding, what you like about teaching. They really don't care about how well you'll adapt culturally, because that's sort of your problem as far as they're concerned. So, whereas JET really cares about how you'll adapt socially, Interac's the opposite. They really want to know that you're going to be okay in the classroom. And to that same end, they'll really help you in anything you want. If you've got a question about, actual pedagogy or teaching philosophy, Interac will be there to train you and help you with that, whereas JET absolutely will not. Interac is also very, very concerned about professionalism. So there's a strict dress code when you work for Interac. They're very concerned with how you present yourself. Are you capable of appearing to be a real adult all the time? Interac wants to see that. And so, like I said, there'll be less help to you in dealing with social concerns and making friends, but they will absolutely help you in terms of fulfilling your job properly. And they'll also help you a lot with finding an apartment, making sure you understand where everything is in town. Like, they'll make sure that you're set up Whereas JET, as a full government program, really isn't set up to help you with that sort of day-to-day minutia. Interac's a little bit better about dealing with that. Your third option, which you've probably heard a lot of people doing, is to work at an eikaiwa, or an after-school English conversation school. Honestly, you'll also hear the most horror stories about working at an eikaiwa. Anyone here know about Nova? No? Nova went bankrupt about 5 years ago, largely due to refusing to pay their employees. They're now reopened. Same branding, same everything, but they're now back on the market. But there's tons of these. There's several famous branches like Aeon, Amity, Nova's another one, Geos. There's tons of these various chains that you can work for, and I hear about the same level of horror stories from each of them. I would say, before you go to work at an eikaiwa, you should probably ask yourself why you're going to Japan. I looked at working with an eikaiwa for my 3rd year, and the hours would have been something like working every day, noon to 9 p.m., and then Saturdays from like 10 to 5 p.m. So that sort of prohibits you from going anywhere, doing anything, or seeing anyone. So that's why I say really think about why you're going to Japan if you're really willing to deal with that, because you're not going to get to see or travel anywhere, because time off in Japan also doesn't exist, and I'll get to that later. They normally will have the worst hours, like I just said, like noon to 9 every single day, and you'll be rewarded with some of the lowest pay rates in the ALT community in Japan, ALT being assistant language teacher. As in, they'll generally pay you about $2,000 a month for those hours. I'm not making that number up. JET will pay you about $3,000 a month before pension and health insurance and the like, and then Interac paid about $2,400 a month. So, also if you work at an eikaiwa, they are obviously for-profit businesses, so you will often be asked to sort of sell classes to your students, and a large part of your job is retention rate, and making sure that your students keep coming or sign up for more classes. And a lot of people may feel that they have ethical problems with that, trying to recommend classes that they don't necessarily feel that the student needs, and they will absolutely push you to sell them, and your job will be based on it. Also, you'll sort of be seen as disposable based on past experiences. A lot of people, tons of people, I have a friend who did it, come to Japan with one of these eikaiwas, such as Aeon, that's the biggest one this happens with. They come to get the visa, spend a month working at Aeon, and then go work for Interac or somewhere else. They just immediately shift. So, you know, there's pros and cons to the situation. I can't blame the people for not wanting to work at an eikaiwa anymore, but I can also then see where the eikaiwa starts to get really ticked off because all of their employees only stay for a month before ditching them. So the employers are probably not going to treat you too terribly kindly, and you may feel insignificant, and that's because they kind of think you are until you stick around for a while. You also will have little control over the curriculum that you teach, because all of these eikaiwas tend to sell themselves on their method. They've all got some sort of motto or method. Hoho is the Japanese word for this very specific method, and you will not be allowed to deviate from that whatsoever, because that's why the parents have paid for this particular eikaiwa's prestige or method. So you don't get to change that whatsoever. With JET and Interac, it sort of depends on where you get placed or particular schools, how much control you get over the curriculum. Those are more of each situation is different. In eikaiwa, it will be handed to you, and you better not deviate. So obviously this is the option I like least, but if for whatever reason you're really desperate to go to Japan for a bit and you don't care about working insane hours, it's totally an option. It's pretty easy to get into. I will say about eikaiwas is if you want to switch to one once you're living in Japan, there's tons of like little small ones, like not chain ones. It's probably run by some foreigner who married a Japanese lady and they now run their own private eikaiwa, and those are actually pretty okay to work at. I've picked up some extra hours just on the side working at one of those, like 2 hours a Saturday, just because, and you get to make up your own curriculum, and that can be a lot of fun. So I'd recommend looking at small private eikaiwas maybe, but I'd say avoid some of the big chain ones. Some websites you can look at if you'd like to go see more about these jobs. Even if you're not looking at going anytime soon, it can give you more of an idea of what sort of requirements they're looking for, what their salaries are. Gaijinpot is this website. They also run a lot of articles, stuff like that. But they've also got a classified section, which is where I got my job working at Interac, actually. So companies do check the resumes and the applications fairly readily on this website. I know a lot of people who've had success with it. Obviously, Jet, Interac, and all these Eikaiwa chains will have their own individual websites you can go to. Jet especially, you will have to go through their website. Their application for Jet goes up around October, generally, is when they post that. So just search Jet Program USA and you'll be able to find it. Ohayo Sensei is probably more useful for people who already live in Japan, but I think it's every week or every 2 weeks they put out a new newsletter of just classified listings for just all sorts of random English teaching jobs all over the country. A lot of those do have the specification that you must already be residing in Japan, but you may get lucky and find one that doesn't have that. And then also, your university's study abroad or work or internship department, any of the groups of your university that handle those will probably have a listing of some sort of internship, or they may have some knowledge. You can probably go ask them, and that'd be a good place. I'll also mention that Gaijinpot does list jobs in other fields than teaching. So you could also, if you work in a technical field or anything else like that, you can also find jobs for those fields listed there. All right, and then let me check the time to make sure we're not, okay, good, we're on time. So let's talk a bit about what it is to actually live in Japan. This may be the slightly more interesting part of this conversation because it's less practicality based. So first one, for apartments, you probably know that they're going to be small because it's Japan. I've had a variety of apartments. I never had a problem living there, but I'm also 5'1" tall, and I tend to not take up a lot of space. But no, actually most apartments were perfectly fine for the size. The only downside is their kitchens don't have counter space, really. So if you like cooking, you're going to find yourself frustrated. That's like the one thing that no one expects to find when they go there is a lack of counter space. I know someone who just got married and then they came over to Japan and they brought all these appliances that they've been given as wedding presents and had nowhere to put them. A lot of people have heard stories about how you'll get government housing or subsidized housing. Don't expect that because there's no guarantee you're going to get it. Government housing specifically, you have to be an employee with the government, which means you work in public school. If you go working for an Eikaiwa, you're not getting government housing. There's no way in hell. Subsidized housing you may be able to get. Interac has some listings of those that they try to direct their employees to. Yeah, don't expect help on your apartment. Also, we'll talk about xenophobia a little bit later more specifically, but there are a lot of places that don't want foreigners living in their apartments. Every time I looked for an apartment in Japan, that sort of came up with the real estate agents being like, oh, you might want to look into this one because they're sort of the only person who seemed okay with the fact that you're white. And that phrase will get said to you, and it's whether or not that's racism is a subject of popular debate. But a high startup cost for apartments. They'll want you to pay like key money and all sorts of other things. When I moved into an apartment, I got them to knock down the startup cost by half after lots of negotiation. It was still $1,800. Non-refundable to move in. Normally you can expect to pay about $3,000. Non-refundable whatsoever. So yeah, find a place that you like and then don't want to move for a while. And also getting a loan as a foreigner in Japan is very, very hard because they'll expect you to skip the country based on what previous foreigners have done. However, as a benefit, it's because they're small, it will help you keep your belongings to what you need. Also because you can only go over to Japan with a certain amount of stuff due to luggage requirements. If you're looking to scale down a lot of your stuff, I know that that's apparently become a popular thing lately, trying to get more minimalistic. This will help you do it. And it'll help you, I guess, realize what you actually need in a living space. It's that sort of like mentality as far as my own personal space. It's actually been a very interesting thing to learn about my time in Japan. As weird as that sounds to say, that that's a lesson I've taken from it, I actually think it's kind of important. Keeping a pet in Japan is difficult because most people don't like pets in their apartment. I cheated, and I was given a kitten by one of my students whose cat had kittens and they needed a home. So I sort of just didn't tell anybody that I had a cat for about 1.5 years and somehow got away with that. I had to replace all the shoji screens in my apartment from where she'd torn them to bits when I moved out. When I actually found my third apartment, I had to let them know that I had a cat, and I was limited to 2 places in the entire city that I could live, because in general, Asia has a thing against cats. They think that they're dirty creatures, so they're pretty okay with letting dogs in the apartment. That would have been an okay option because dogs aren't dirty, as far as Asia's concerned. Cats are dirty, and that exists in China and Korea too, and I forget the actual cultural reason for it. But just letting you know, and also pets are, expensive, and they take up space, which given your apartment is small, they may not be happy stuck in such a tiny place. A cat will tear up your shoji and your tatami all to bits. So pets may be a little difficult, but hamsters! I've also kept a hamster in Japan. They're very easy to take care of, and everyone loves hamsters. As far as food goes, I really hope you're not vegetarian. Because there are some vegetarian restaurants in Japan, and obviously you can get vegetables there. But as far as when you go to school and when you eat out with people, there may or may not be a vegetarian option. I'd be willing to say there's an 80% chance there will not be a vegetarian option. And it's kind of hard to deal with. I had a friend on Jet who was vegetarian, who did manage to deal with it, but I think she got a headache at least 5 times a day from people insisting that she eat meat. Another interesting thing is that apparently Japanese people think bacon is a vegetable. And she was given, she asked for a salad because she's a vegetarian, and they brought back salad with bacon on it. To which I explained, I'm very sorry, my friend here is a vegetarian. She can't eat bacon. Is there any way you can make it again without the bacon? But there are only vegetables here. Well, no, there's bacon. Bacon is a vegetable. No, I'm pretty sure we're having some sort of miscommunication. Bacon's not a vegetable. This is meat. What does bacon come from, ma'am?
Pigs.
She didn't know. She didn't know the answer. She just assumed bacon was a vegetable. So you may have some interesting moments like that as well. Fruits and then some vegetables are very expensive in Japan. In some cases, prohibitively expensive. How much is a pound of grapes in America right now? $1.98. In Japan, they're $6.
What?
$6 for a pound of grapes. Prohibitively expensive. Apples, you'll probably pay about $1.50 per apple.
Wait, what?
$1.50 per apple. I'm not making these prices up. Sager back there, you came to visit me, you know about this. Strawberries can be obtained cheaply during some seasons. It depends on if they're in season. There's also plenty of ways to cook food from back home. I really, really like cooking, so I came with my recipe book and everything, and I could find ways to easily adapt all of my recipes, things like crab cakes, pork stews, any of that. However, when I got really, really sick, because obviously my immune system is programmed for America, not Japan, so you will get sick. I was sick for probably about a month is how long that J-flu dragged on. But I really wanted chicken noodle soup, like more than anything else in the world. Could not get it, or anything resembling any of the foods that I would like to eat when I'm sick at home. So that was my main downside with food, is I love Japanese food, but just at the time I wanted comfort food, just couldn't get it. And that was slightly disappointing. Fast food doesn't really exist the way you think it does. There are, of course, McDonald's and Burger Kings, everyone knows that, but it's not like, in most cases, there are some McDonald's drive-thrus, I've seen them, but they're not very common, and so in a lot of cases you're going to have to get up, walk to the store, which is probably 2 or 3 blocks away. You probably don't have a car, as we'll cover in a little bit, so you've got to take the time to walk there, you'll order. Most people sit and eat in at the restaurant, because obviously you don't want your food to get cold by the time you walk back to your apartment. So that sort of fast food, as you're thinking, doesn't exist. In America, there's also a lot of microwave meals that you can easily just take home and zap. Those also don't really exist in Japan. I mean, there's ramen. You can easily get ramen. That's about the closest you're going to get. And it's really good ramen, like some really good varieties there that I can't get here. But there's also gyudon, or beef bowl. That's about the closest you get to fast food, is gyudon. You should probably learn to cook, or you will lose a lot of money. Because eating out in Japan is kind of expensive, except for the aforementioned gyudon, which is about $2, $2.50 for a normal-sized bowl. That's probably your best option. But yeah, in a lot of other places, restaurants are kind of expensive, so it's a lot cheaper if you just eat at home. And 7-Eleven meals kind of get old after a while, and are also a little bit more expensive than if you just cook them yourself. Allergy information is very clearly labeled on all Japanese food by government law. You will need to look up the kanji, of course, for your particular allergy, but it'll be very clearly labeled in this little grid thing on the side. So if you've got allergies and you're worried about it, you're probably going to be fine. Allergies are completely commonly labeled in Japan, don't worry. If you work in a public school, especially if you work in an elementary or middle school, you will be expected to eat absolutely everything on your plate, and it will be the same thing as the students. So if you've got allergies or things, a friend of mine was allergic to shrimp, and he had to work out some special deal with this thing. If you just don't particularly want to eat a food item that day, tough luck, you're going to eat it. I particularly hate eating anything where I can see its eyes, so lots of small fish. And my students thought it was hilarious to watch me force that down. But no, I still have to eat it. It's not like I can have a debate about it. It's not like we can debate the finer moral dilemmas of eating something that can look back at you. No, they just wanted you to eat it because that's the Japanese mindset of mokanai, or not wasting anything, and appreciating what's been given to you. As a teacher, you are expected to reflect that in its entirety. So if you work in a school, I hope you're willing to not ask questions about the thing you're about to eat. As far as driving, it's completely possible to get a car there. I've actually got my Japanese driver's license on me in my wallet still. It's possible to get a car, but there are some difficulties with it. It's very expensive on multiple levels. Most people in Japan keep very new cars from the last 5 years or so. Things before that, the way they do insurance and inspections, the rates get really, really steep the older your car is. So you'll be expected to buy, it's not like you're going to go over there and just buy a car from 20 years ago and get by with it. That's not going to happen. Then you have to pay shotgun and insurance and inspection, and those things will be a couple $1,000s. If you're going to drive an actual car, you'll be expected to take lessons from a Japanese driving school, and those will be several $100s. It's basically just going to keep piling up. But, however, I will say that driving on the left is really not that weird. I got used to it pretty fast. I was really terrified actually when I came back to America and I started driving on the left. I had to fix that really fast. That lasted all of 30 seconds before I learned that lesson. Some car shops will not sell to those with international permits, or if you're a member of the U.S. military and you go in and you got your little SOPA ID and your SOPA driver's license. Like when I first went to go buy my scooter, which is what I drove in Japan, I walked in going, hey, I'd like to buy a scooter, and they were like, yeah, no, we don't sell you. And I was like, I'm sorry, why not? They're like, well, we don't take military IDs, because I lived in Yokosuka, which is where the huge naval base is. And I was like, oh, I don't have a military license, I've got a Japanese one. And he dropped all pretense of formal, polite Japanese and was just like, Misete kurete! Like, no way, show me. So I pulled it out and he was just like, huh. Okay, well then our scooters are upstairs, I guess. Based on that experience, I think you might find it difficult. In Fukushima, I know that there was one dealer who all the foreigners went to because it was the one dealer who was totally okay selling to foreigners. Apparently a lot of the others were sort of kind of wary about the idea of letting foreigners drive their cars. However, for public transit, trains are actually pretty cheap to ride on. For passes, they're based on distance. There's not really a sort of like DART has their all-day or like 2-hour permits. Those don't really exist in Japan. You pay based on distance, you pay per ride. Buses are actually really expensive in Japan, probably because of gas prices. A 20-minute bus ride in Japan will probably cost you about $3 one way. So, as opposed to, like I said, DART, where you get all-day passes, that doesn't exist really either. However, if you work for a company, they will probably reimburse your public transit. A lot of companies actually won't allow their employees to drive to work. It was explained to us that if you were to get into an accident in some way, whether you caused it or somebody else caused it, it didn't matter. The public opinion backlash would be, oh, that company wasn't properly taking care of their employees. Do they have a problem with the JR public train system? Do they have a problem? You know, so rather than deal with the public backlash, they'll just pay for you to take public transit. So that's what I did for a while. Like I said, I drove a scooter. It was quite nice, paying $4 to fill up my tank. I still drive one here in America now, mainly because it's been 3 years since I've driven a car and I'm kind of terrified to do so. But the scooter was very, very nice, easy to get around on. I'd recommend that route if you want to drive in Japan. Also, the scooter written test for the Japanese license is very easy to take. As far as culture shock, I actually didn't really experience a whole lot of it when I went there, but I also decided at age 13 that I was going to go live in Japan, and spent lots and lots of years obsessively, compulsively researching everything I could on it. So it is possible to bypass culture shock through sheer determination and amount of research. There's several good books. Moon's Living Abroad in Japan is a very good one. If you're like me and OCD and willing to read about cable companies in Japan before you've even moved there. Most people actually break down into tears their first week, for no good reason. A friend of mine found it when she got minorly lost 2 blocks away from her apartment and broke down crying her first week. Most people do that and it's totally normal. So if that happens to you, don't worry that you're not cut out for life in Japan. It happens to literally everybody, just no one wants to admit to it. I broke down and cried about my second week. Just for no good reason. I couldn't even tell you why, I just did. You should probably try to avoid what's known as the foreign bubble. It's where people will get to Japan because speaking Japanese is exhausting, even if you're fluent in it. Like, I can go translate for flow, but it's really exhausting to suddenly speak Japanese 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for everything you want to do. You'll get a lot more tired. So some people solve this by creating a foreign bubble around them, as it were. Well, they will simply come home and watch American TV they downloaded or listen to American music they brought with them. They'll only cook foods from back home or recipes that they brought with them. They'll talk to the other ALTs, they won't go meet Japanese people, and they'll create an environment around themselves where they really don't have to interact with a foreign culture because that's exhausting. And, you know, honestly, sometimes, yeah, of course, you want to go sit in a Starbucks and just chill for a while. I explain to my students that every time you see a foreigner in a Starbucks with a latte, don't disturb them because that's their recharge time. That's our tolerance meter getting refilled back up with that latte. But in general, try to avoid doing that all the time because it's a really easy habit to slip into, and I seem to have it to a lot of people. Like I said, speaking Japanese 24/7 is a lot more exhausting than you might think. I went over there being functional in Japanese, but even then, like the first week, I couldn't figure out why I was tired all the time. And then someone explained to me, oh, well, you're basically translating absolutely everything you encounter, which is mentally exhausting for you. So that might happen to you when you go over there. Don't be worried, it'll pass after about a month. The other thing that's difficult to explain to some people is that your coworkers are never going to be your friends, just because of how Japanese society works. You are friendly with your coworkers, obviously, and you hear about them often going out to bars afterwards and you drink together, but they're not really your friends. There's a certain wall you keep up, and it's horrendously socially impolite to break that wall. So, whereas a lot of people didn't understand why I felt kind of lonely for a while, it's because I didn't really get to be friends with a lot of people I saw on a daily basis, whereas before I was best friends with all my employees, or all my coworkers. And so it's kind of weird to get used to that, to not be able to just, tell jokes and talk about anything. It wasn't anything like that. And also, you will have to learn entirely new ways of expressing yourself. For example, I'm a very sarcastic person in normal life. I insult people without actually meaning it, and if I insult you, it probably means that we're good enough friends that I know you can handle it. Sarcasm like that doesn't really exist in the Japanese language. There is sarcasm, but it's different and it's hard to explain. So even if you know Japanese, you'll have to figure out how to express yourself in a way that feels genuine to you while still being polite and accurate, and that takes a long time to figure out, even for people who are really good at Japanese. As far as your Japanese ability, carrying on from that, it's not required for most companies. Like I said, Jet isn't really concerned about your Japanese ability, but do you also really want to be that guy? You know, that guy who goes and holds up the line at McDonald's because they're busy going, hamu baba. You don't really want to be that guy. So a lot of cities have international associations. Pretty much all cities will have an international association. And they'll offer programs not only for foreigners from America or Britain, but they also offer Chinese programs, Korean programs for visitors from those countries. And they'll help you learn Japanese, and they're very supportive. They're often very discounted, like $70 for a year of twice-a-week Japanese lessons, stuff like that. There's also Kumon. Japan has a correspondence program where, we've got Kumon here. They basically got that meant for foreigners that will teach you Japanese. And you've got like bi-weekly Skype meetings with your teacher, and you fill out, and there's like worksheets to go through. And I think that was like $100 a month or something to do. So there's that option as well if you're the type who prefers a textbook sort of course. Obviously, there's multiple online options for learning things. I know there's, WaniKani, Scritter has a Japanese option. Duolingo is in the beta for their Japanese option, so hopefully that'll be out. I think that's stated for 2015 release, is what they're saying. Probably spring or summer 2015, Duolingo will have it. There's things like JapanesePod101.com. There's just tons of other websites. There's also the option of just a friend of mine who's studying for the JLPT N1. Just pull up Japanese Wikipedia and just was reading articles. So you can also just do that. I think the Japan Times newspaper has bilingual English and Japanese. NHK Radio's got several programs. There's all sorts of stuff you can use. You will need to make sure that you learn more than just textbook Japanese and slang. A lot of people here who study Japanese seem to think that those are the two things you need to learn. Well, of course you need to know more than textbook Japanese. You gotta know slang, like datebayo. Please never say datebayo. And I will probably personally slap you if you say that. Or my brother knows, what is it, yada yada, from JoJo. But a lot of things that people don't think about needing to know is how to express negativity in Japanese. Because anyone who's taken a Japanese course will probably be able to tell you they don't really say no the same way. You're expected, if someone asks you to do something and you don't want to go do it or you're busy, you have to kind of be like, that doesn't work as well, I'm kind of busy, chotto sumimasen, sore wa. You kind of have to, there's a different way of saying no. And especially if like a doctor horrendously screws up and gives you a wrong diagnosis or gives you medicine that you're allergic to, you need to be able to properly express why you're that upset at them. Which happened to a friend of mine. They were given medicine that they had an allergic reaction to that caused their throat to close up. And we had to explain why we were so angry. But yes, there's also the difference between functional and fluent in Japanese. A lot of people say that they want to become fluent, and of course if you live in Japan, you have to become fluent. What's probably going to happen is that you become functional, which means you can totally communicate in Japanese. You can set up your own bank account, you're totally fine to live there, but you may not be able to debate the finer points of the Meiji Restoration era in Japanese with someone. Both of these are totally okay, and there are some elitist critics in the Japanese language community who insist that fluency and JLPT N1 is the only way to go, and that's kind of nonsense, and just warning you that those people exist, and functional Japanese is a completely different level. And that's probably what you should aspire to, is the ability to properly express yourself. You don't need to worry about fluency for quite a while, depending on what you want to do. Xenophobia, because that's a fun topic, as I've mentioned a couple of times. Whether or not we call this racism is a hotly debated topic, and there is no good answer right now. Yes, xenophobia, definitely still a thing. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. There are a lot of people who will say, oh no, they love foreigners. No, you're not, there's no such thing. Whoever tells you that's just really being too sensitive. No, there's absolutely still xenophobia in the sense of like, I can't live in whatever apartment I want because I'm foreign, or just certain assumptions that people make based on it. The amount that this will personally affect you sort of depends on your own individual tolerance and your own individual outlook. A lot of people decide to just say, oh, it's not racist because they're a very insular society and you have to look at all these variables, you have to understand, and that they sort of see it as the norm and they don't really address it. And then I know people who actively fight against it. If someone says something xenophobic or racist to them, they will actively stand up and argue with that person. And both of these approaches have their arguments for and against. I'm not really here to say which one's correct. I do have some funny stories where that's come up. My favorite being, we were at a shop run by a foreigner from Poland. So we all were speaking Japanese because that's the common language between us, because she didn't speak English. She had a little coffee and jewelry shop. But the three of us were talking in Japanese, and this old lady walks in, an old Japanese lady, to get some of her jewelry fixed, and was listening to us talking Japanese for about 3 minutes. And then after 3 minutes, she said to me and my friend, going, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't really talk to you guys or address you, it's just I don't speak English very well. And of course she's saying this in Japanese. And the shop owner actually spoke first, going, what language have we been speaking for 3 minutes? And the old lady was like, I don't understand. We were speaking Japanese. So like, didn't you get the sense that you could have talked to them in Japanese? Oh, but they're foreign. Yeah, they speak Japanese, but they can't. But you just witnessed them speaking Japanese fluently. So things like that will happen. And like I said, It may or may not bother you. It's basically that works on an individual basis, so I can't really say how that will affect you. As far as traveling in Japan, seriously, why would you go there if you're not going to travel around Japan and explore things? There's tons of ways to do it. JET is very good about setting up various exploratory trips and various excursions that you can go on with other ALTs. They'll deal with travel agents for you. There are highway buses that you can take places that are very cheap. Like a 4-hour highway bus ride is about $30. And that's how I did most of my traveling, is by highway bus, so long as you're willing to sit there for a while with your iPad and entertain yourself. There's also several websites with discount airfare. Jetstar is the most famous airline in Japan offering discount airfare to different islands nearby or other countries. Your vacation time is precious in Japan, and it is also your sick time. Taking leave of absence in Japan is also a form of like treason, as far as most companies are going to see. As a JET, I got 20 days a year. As an Interac employee, I got 7. And that's also your sick time. So if you get hospitalized, as I was, or forbidden to go to work for a week because of your sickness, that's also your vacation time. So if you've got it all allocated for vacation days and then you get sick, you were kind of SOL. So you kind of do have to plan appropriately, leaving a good amount of days in just in case you get sick or something else comes up. There are, however, plenty of chances to travel to surrounding countries. Lots of Japanese travel agencies will run all these different packs, because Japanese people really love traveling. So if you really want to go travel, like I went to China in my time there, that was really cool because I'm on that side of the world already, why not? Tons more people go to Korea, or they go to Taiwan, or the Philippines, or Guam, or Australia. So there's tons of chances to go do that. You can probably find other ALTs who will gladly be your travel buddies to go do other things with you. And also omiyage, which is the Japanese word for souvenirs, will become the bane of your existence. Because yes, you will have to buy omiyage for all of your schools, and you'll have to make sure that there's enough for all of the staff, and it'll take up space in your luggage, and that's a thing that you'll have to be very familiar with when you go do that. And that's largely all of my giant, broad overview of Japan. So we've got, how much time is left? 10, 15?
12 minutes.
12 minutes? So yeah, open up to any questions. I'll try to get as many as I can. Yeah?
Did you get a teaching English as a foreign language certification? It's not important you didn't get it.
I did get one. I did not go into Japan having it. I went in as a web designer. But JET offered a stipend, like you could apply for a grant and you get $100 towards a TEFL certification. So I did get one with specialties in business English and teaching to young learners. For Interac, that was a huge, that basically got me automatically accepted, I think. And a lot of the smaller English conversation schools wanted to see that. JET couldn't really have given a fart about it. So if you've got one, great. It'll help, especially if you want to go teach in other countries afterwards, it'll help you. I think it was really important for me personally, just as far as pedagogy goes. I totally recommend it. But as far as strictly getting a job, it's certainly not a requirement.
Cool.
Yeah.
Have you had any problems with any requirement?
For certification?
Yes.
I used Eye2Eye, which is they did solely an online course. They worked really, really well, and I liked their coursework. It was solid. It seems to be well regarded, as far as I can tell. There's several others, though. Okay. Yeah?
I'm interested in electricity, appliances, and laundry.
Electricity is somewhat expensive. Don't run your aircon too terribly much in Japan. Your air conditioning. You said appliances?
Yeah.
In what sense?
Bringing laptops and...
Laptops will all have something built into them if they're a modern day laptop that will handle the voltage change just fine.
Okay, so there's a voltage change.
There is. I think, what is it in America? 110, 130? 110. I think in Japan it's 90. Thank you. In like the west half of Japan and the east half of Japan, it's slightly different. So if you bring don't ask me why. But yeah, if you bring an alarm clock, it may run a little bit slower. I've seen that affect some people. But like my laptop, my hair straightener, or I didn't bring that many appliances like that. But those all ran just fine. And then what was the last one? Laundry. You probably won't have a dryer because the Japanese electrical grid is not set up for that much energy, and also you'd be paying a really hefty energy bill. So I just had a washing machine in my unit, and I just washed my clothes and then hung them outside to dry, or if it was winter and snowing like a meter high, I just hung them inside in my kitchen. There's also laundromats that are fairly easy to get to in most places, so you can do it there as well. Alright, next.
What was the most surprising thing you saw in Japan? Even after you know about research.
In what sense? Surprising good or surprising bad?
Surprising good.
Surprising good. I was surprised at just how energetic and open their children were. You know, a lot of times in America, we talk, you know, children are very stranger danger aware. I coach gymnastics now, and I had a 3-year-old come up, or like, he ran up to see me, and the mom was like, oh, don't bother the coach. And he was like, but Mom, she's not going to rape me. And he's already, like, clearly been told all about this sort of thing. I'm like, oh my goodness. And in Japan, there are now more warnings going about pedophiles or kidnappings, that sort of thing. But in general, kids there are much more open. They're incredibly willing to talk to. They're incredibly honest, and that really surprised me. It was just the attitude children had towards new things in the outside. Yeah?
What are bullet trains like?
Shinkansen are very nice. I use them multiple times to get from Fukushima to Tokyo. It's basically like someone took an airplane cabin and put it on like wheels and sent it along. They're comfy, but they're also expensive. I guess they're nice. There's now like the shortest bullet train ride exists for like some mountain resort. It's like 2 minutes. Or if you want the experience, you can take the bullet train from Tokyo to Ueno, which is 2 minutes, and probably will cost you $18. It's nice. You can get food from like the little trolleys that they bring through, but you know. Yes? YouTube channel was kawaiijutsu. Go back to the beginning. I'll pull it up in a second and show it again. Okay, way back to back.
You said that public transit buses are expensive, but trains are expensive. But trains are inexpensive?
Comparatively, yes, compared to buses.
Are trains really that, like, do they operate on really short distances?
They do. There's tons of local train lines. There's basically, in Japan, there's 3 types of trains. There's the local, there's the express, and then there's the rapid express. The local will operate like every 2 minutes of a train ride, kind of like how the dark, like the red or blue lines, they'll be like that. There's also express trains, there's also Shinkansen, bullet trains, but it's fairly easy to get around just by public transit, unless you're in a seriously rural area. Anyone else? Yeah?
You mentioned xenophobia. Even if you come from the United States, are they racist towards you because you come from the United States?
I'm sorry, what?
Are they necessarily racist towards you because you come from the United States, or did you feel as though you experienced xenophobia because...
Because of my race or because of my nationality?
Did you think it was because of your nationality or because you were of American descent?
I think it was more just my descent, the fact that I was not Japanese. Because obviously most of the time they don't know my nationality. They probably assume that you're American, but obviously they have no way of knowing that upon first seeing me. When I told them that I was actually of German descent, that actually made people feel better in some cases. So there may be some truth to that, but I think it's just the difference, and it's just like they also don't expect you to speak Japanese, so they're kind of worried. Like if you know the rules, if you're going to cause a problem, that's what they're worried about. So I think they're more concerned about what's about to happen in the surrounding area than about your country personally. Yeah?
Can we find this presentation online?
Yes, it is online on my Prezi because they're all online. I will have to find a way. If you search for the title of the presentation with Prezi, P-R-E-Z-I, it'll probably come up in a Google search because they're publicly listed. Yeah?
Utilities like gas, cable,
water, yeah.
and internet. How are they?
Internet, I pay about $35 a month for 100 megabytes down and 100 megabytes up. That's unheard of here. Electricity is somewhat expensive, but not terribly so. Water is quite expensive. Gas is not expensive. And cable I didn't use. I just avoided the NHK man every time he came to my apartment, and I also never used satellite radio or satellite TV or anything like that. All right, we've got 5 more minutes. So any other questions? Yeah.
For teaching at like high school or middle school, you mentioned you only get a certain amount of paid days off. What are the holidays you just given?
Japan actually has a ton of national holidays, like a lot more than America. But a lot of times those will fall on like a Tuesday or a Wednesday, and you're getting those. Generally expect 1 or 2 every couple of months.
Is there like a summer vacation that you get as a teacher?
Nothing you get. Students will get it. Students absolutely get a summer break and winter break. You as a teacher will be expected to be at that desk. The 2 biggest holidays are Golden Week in the first week of May-ish, and then New Year's holiday is about a week for that. Is that yes?
What are some of the hardships that you had at work that you didn't get help from? Like,
That I had at work?
a lot of help.
I had one teacher whose English was just terrible. Like the students would actually write in surveys saying that they're really thankful the ALT is there because they can't understand their teacher. That functional level of terrible in English. And a lot of times she would openly correct me to the wrong answer in class. And so it was kind of weird trying to figure out the balance between, like, obviously I want to being a teacher in Japan is a huge position of respect. So I want to show respect to my coworker because she's a nice lady, she's just terrible at her job. So what level can I be like, no, that's actually the wrong answer? So I tried to get help from that from Jet, and they were just like, figure it out, you don't know. Whatever works for you. So hardships like that. In one case, my vice principal at my day school was openly against foreigners. So just hated everything about me. If I wanted to try something different, just insta shut down because a foreigner had the idea. Stuff like that. So more the social climate of everything else. Yes?
How much, sorry if you answered this in the beginning or anything, but how much value does an American teaching degree have?
Obviously it'll look very, very good in your interview if you've got the degree and the experience. It's a plus, certainly. It's not required, but it'll help. I don't think, obviously it's a plus.
I was wondering if they really...
I'm sorry, what?
I was just wondering if they would totally ignore the degree.
No, they don't totally ignore it. Obviously, having the background in teaching does look favorably on you. Yes?
Did you feel like you need to sustain yourself with your salary?
Absolutely. I was able to travel very often. I got to do tons of cool stuff. I had absolutely no problems. I joined a gym, and those are expensive, so no, not a problem at all. Yes?
Kendo classes, how available
Kendo might be slightly rare. There's tons of karate gyms I know of that let people in to practice various forms of martial arts. Kendo can be done. You can also, if you work in a public school, they'll probably be more than happy with you, like, joining that school's Kendo club and, like, doing stuff with the students. That might actually be a good thing. So yeah, it's totally possible to take up that sort of hobby. Anyone else? Yes?
Is it possible to work with adults teaching, like teaching English to adults?
Yes, if you work for one of the private companies. There's one in particular whose name I can't remember right now. But if you just search for like Japanese or adults or business English will be the thing that you'll primarily be teaching to adults. Yeah, if you search for like English conversations for Japan, teaching adults, that company should come up. There's one very specific one that actually looks very, very good. Anyone? Is that the end of it? Yes?
How prevalent are other languages, like, in schools?
French is the second most popular option. In most, the Ministry of Education has specified that from middle school onwards, it is English that is to be taught as a requirement. But several private schools want French. I had some teachers who wanted to speak to me in German, so that's kind of cool. But those seem to be the two most popular ones. Time is up?
Yes.
Okay. Any last quick question? Anything very important?
How long did it take you to become fluent?
I'd studied for 3 years before I went to Japan, and then probably after about a year in Japan, I considered myself there. Thank you. All right. Like I said, you can find